Violent confrontations have always been part of human history. One cannot picture the past without remembering the countless wars fought over countless of reasons. Yet, whereas in the early past a ruler could command a war and was over with a victory or defeat on the battlefield, the same can't be said for modern warfare. Democracy, new technology, and modern strategies changed warfare drastically, and everyone's role involved. But what's left after all battles are fought and blood has been shed? What's left of the people who had to abandon their humanity and fight for their country? What's left of a soldier after a war is ended? What is a soldier? The official definition is a person who is in an army and wears its uniform, especially someone who fights when there is war. Quick and simple explanation. Objectively, a soldier has always been an instrument of the state to exercise external force, but their role has changed despite. In the past, they represented the interest of their ruler to expand, for example, in an offensive manner, whereas nowadays it's more common to see a soldier in a more defensive position, protecting the interests and values of their state instead of attacking. This is, of course, a very Western and idealized perspective, given that many wars in the world still rage on. But it's still important to note that despite how the identity and role of a soldier varies across all continents, countries, and cultures, they all suffer similar physical and psychological consequences due to war and are often overlooked the same. What does it mean to be a soldier during war? Why did you become a soldier? For me, it was always part of growing up as a man. My father served, my brother served, almost all my uncles served. I thought to myself, okay, one does that. That's part of it, to have done something for your country. Why did I become a soldier? Curiosity, ignorance, and maybe a bit of adventurous spirit and a little wish of a child. At my age, you experienced the GDR, and the GDR was a country with a broad military base. Everyone was somehow involved in a military association, and if you weren't, you were cut off from society in one way or another. As a 10-year-old, you can only draw conclusions from that. Everyone has their own reasons for becoming a soldier. These were snippets of an interview we conducted with German soldiers who came to the German war cemetery in Lommel to do volunteer work for 2 weeks. They are soldiers of a modern world, and while the perspective or motivations of being a soldier might change in their service period, the reasons for becoming one are quite similar to the ones from the soldiers of the past. It was widely observed how at the beginning of their service time, mandatory or not, even in a time of war, soldiers were mostly motivated and determined to fight for their country. Not only because patriotism and nationalism were more widespread in the past, but also due to wartime propaganda and how it affected the masses. Phrases and posters like, "I want you," "Let us go forward together," or "Dafür kämpfen wir, für das Brot unserer Kinder," and the controlled flow information influenced drafting, the attitude and motivations of the soldiers positively. But despite how beautified war was depicted, in the end, every soldier experienced the horrors and suffering on their very own body and soul. In a life or death situation, the body undergoes a chemical reaction known as the fight or flight response. This response heightens awareness, numbs pain, and otherwise prepares the body for escape or imminent attack. This is a normal and necessary reaction to a dangerous situation, but it's not meant to be active for a longer period of time, and if it is, it causes great harm. A soldier in war is in a constant state of stress, and therefore in a constant state of fight or flight. It's been documented how soldiers in this state suffer a breakdown caused by prolonged mental and physical effort. This breakdown which they experienced was called names like nostalgia, old sergeant's disease, or shell shock. Whereas now it's correctly named battle fatigue or combat fatigue, since it occurs after a prolonged exposure to combat. Combat fatigue is considered a neurotic disorder, with the symptoms being startle reactions to noises or movements, easy irritability, progressing even to acts of violence, and sleep disturbances. In the past, it was believed that soldiers suffering from battle fatigue had a pre-existing mental illness. As a result, trainees were screened for potential mental health problems, formerly labeled as weak condition, and were not allowed to join the military if they showed signs. However, the military learned that you can't predict a soldier's mental health during combat, and it's not a question of if it will happen, but when. Therefore, after the Second World War, psychologists established a time frame of 60 to 240 days for a soldier's breakdown, depending on the intensity and frequency of combat. Yet, with the war raging on, the primary concern was to bring these soldiers back to the field as soon as possible. It was common for them to be sent to aid stations at the rear of the front, induced to sleep 48 hours, given a hot meal, a shower, and to be evaluated by the doctor before being sent back, all in 3 days. And although this method worked positively, it was only functional for a short time. During the Second World War, more than 500,000 US service members experienced some sort of psychiatric collapse, and alarmingly, 40% of medical discharges were due to mental conditions. The existence of psychological effects of warfare were documented as far back as ancient Greece. Herodotus was the first Greek historian to portray it, writing about an Athenian warrior who went blind after seeing the soldier next to him being killed, despite not experiencing any bodily harm himself. Herodotus is followed by Homer, who described likely the most famous depiction of war trauma from the ancient Greek era, Achilles and the loss of Patroclus. And following Homer are countless other historians and authors who illustrate the psychological trauma caused by war over the centuries, showing how soldiers of the past experienced the stress of war similar to their modern counterparts. But what happens to a soldier after war, after risking their life and experiencing unthinkable things? Of course, at first, they were eager to return to their families, friends, and civilian life. Yet after a little time they become bored, restless, regular life seeming pale compared to the constant stimulation the battlefield provided. Their military service was not just a job, it was their identity, which solidified inside of them with every battle, with every deployment. Coming back to civilian life rips this identity away and forced them to try and forge a new one. But how much of them was left? How could they let go of their soldier identity when it saved their life over and over again? In the military, a highly regimented environment, they had a purpose, comradeship, and a profound sense of duty and respect. And suddenly they have to create a new life worth living for themselves, in a society where they're not understood, while dealing with the psychological issues that followed them after war. Because while for some the effects of combat fatigue faded, for some they stayed. These symptoms can develop into post-traumatic stress disorder, or in short, PTSD. The fight or flight response, which was once constantly active, could now be triggered by everyday stressful life situations. Some people may find that it makes it difficult to concentrate and that simple tasks become overwhelming. Some may experience paranoia, which can cause them to lock doors or look over their shoulders. Others may find that they are struggling with the most challenging symptoms, which can include nightmares and flashbacks that cause them to relive past traumatic events. All these factors negatively affect the life of the veteran. It causes them to be more easily irritable, more prone to angry outbursts and reckless self-destructive behavior, which is described as a common symptom. But perhaps one of the most crucial symptoms is avoidance. Getting veterans to ask for help, no matter from whom, may be one of the biggest obstacles yet. Studies have shown up to 50% of veterans with significant mental health issues have not sought treatment. Most veterans don't talk about their experience, bottling up years' worth of trauma and even taking it to their grave. Those years of war, a fraction of their lifetime, completely reshaped their person and the rest of their life. I don't think you ever go back to real normality, or what was known as real normality. What do you like about being a soldier? In this job, you have to push your limits. Of course, you have to do things you don't like, but then I have people around me who have the same motivation to do this job, and that's a lot of fun. I'm able to do things that I wouldn't be able to do as a civilian, and although a lot of the things I have to do are negative for me in the moment, in retrospect, they were a lot of fun and helped me progress. The identity of a soldier is not something you can put in a box or explain in a short animated video. The identity of a soldier after war is even more complex and difficult to grasp. For a long time, PTSD, the psychological consequences of warfare, and the post-war identity crisis were considered unimportant, and even now are still often overlooked. Whether you are on the winning side or losing side, war has a negative impact on everyone, and you never know what someone is going through, and whether life has been gentle to them. So recognizing their unseen struggles and showing kindness can truly make a significant difference to their lives. Everyone is worth saving.